What is the difference between sci-fi and fantasy? Well, I have my own definition for each of those two. I prefer just to give you my own explanation of this instead of like a textbook definition, just because hopefully it'll make you understand at least where I'm coming from in terms of these two differences in this. And my opinion is probably more of a nerd opinion of both of these concepts, both of these things. But basically, for me, a fantasy movie is a world building movie that's the world is completely built from the ground up, every aspect from character to the world itself to the placings, the settings, everything, including even the physics that encompasses the world around it, from the technology to the culture. Everything is built into a fantasy. It's a basically a complete fabrication, a complete fiction. Sci-fi to me should be rooted in at least science or pseudoscience. For an example, science fiction in the early 50s, you had a lot of movies that dealt with the question of nuclear science of the day. A lot of it was wrong, but it was at least tried to have its roots in actual science. But the reason why a lot of those movies were wrong is because simply they were we just didn't know a lot about it, because for one, nuclear power was in its infancy in those days. The the general public, including a lot of the filmmakers, they didn't have access to that information like we do today. And so you had a lot of assumptions and theories based on this. But for a good example for a sci-fi versus fantasy, there is, to me, two classic. Well, there's multiple classics for at least fantasy for sure, but the classic to me, the classic example for sci-fi would be Star Trek. Star Trek was rooted in, for the most part, real science. At least the original Star Trek run, and I would say the new Star Trek stuff, which is not very good, and I think the reason why it's lost its roots, I think they're trying to make more of a fantasy action world out of it, like you've seen in the Jar Jar Abrams versions, which, in general I liked, but they are trying to transform Star Trek into something else. And Star Trek originally was more, it's always been rooted in science and, or at least theoretical sciences, especially when it comes to like the propulsion systems and things like that, dark matter, things that are theoretical sciences, but nonetheless, they're actually real research topics from scientific sources. But also, and some people will probably argue to the end of the day about this, but the classic example of fantasy is obviously Star Wars. Star Wars is a complete fictionalized world, complete fictionalized science in it. There's no real, you don't need to know the reason why they can travel through hyperspace. They just can. And that's just the world of fantasy. So, after those introductions, let's move on to my first review of the day. This would be Dune, a movie I would definitely call a fantasy. Some people, it's probably been called a sci-fi fantasy, but it's definitely a fantasy. And one of the grounding principles of this movie is the fact of how they can travel through and what allows them to travel through hyperspace. If you're familiar with Dune, I probably should went back and do a little backstory, but in Dune, part of the way in what they use to influence hyperspace or to create wormholes is kind of the MacGuffin of the story, which is the spice. The spice is a like an aphrodisiac type of psycho hallucinogenic substance found on the planet Arrakis, the planet Arrakis, Arachnus, excuse me. But it assumed, but it's something. It's almost like the Force in a way. It's kind of influences everything in this universe. But they use this to explain how they can travel through hyperspace. Well, this makes it a fantasy because this is a complete kind of fabrication, at least on in terms of what we know. You could, I guess, call it theoretical, but it's completely based on just alchemy in a kind of our universe, and our scientific knowledge. So that makes it a fantasy. But Dune was a story created by a man called. It was a novel by a man called Frank Herbert. This is the Dune novel. I have not read it yet. I've had it for a while. I'm just not a big reader of fiction. I generally enjoy a lot of nonfiction when I read history, things like that. But I have seen Dune 1984 before going to see the new Dune. And Dune 1984 was directed by David Lynch. It was written for the screen by David Lynch. But David Lynch basically got his feet held to the fire by time constraints. He had originally written about a 4-hour treatment of the screenplay. And after he started filming, they came to him, the producer came to him and said, this is going to have to be 2 hours. I think it's maybe like 2 hours, 10 minutes, something like that. Um, and David is like, well, there's no way I can make this movie in 2 hours. So he, kind of what I'm getting at here with the original Dune is that I don't know if he went back and he obviously had to go back and rewrite a lot of things just because he had to do so much condensing. And I think it turned David Lynch into a Hollywood director and not the David Lynch we would know. Because that's what I feel when I see this movie. It's a very good movie. People love it. I love the movie. It's good, but I feel like it's not David Lynch's directing style. I feel like it is more conventional in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of the special effects, the practical special effects are amazing for the time period. It's a good movie. It was well written, but the thing is a lot of things he had to condense so much. He had to just come in and just he had to come in and just condense the script down and basically just hit you over the head with dialogue and explain the story to you in words. So we move on to Dune 19. We move on from Dune 1984 to Dune 2021, directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by John Spaths and Denis Villeneuve, Denis Villeneuve, and Eric Roth did the screenplay. This has Timothy Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Zendaya. You can see some pictures from the movie here. For some reason, I bring this up before, but it also has Oscar Isaacs, Jason Momoa, Stellan Skarsgård, Josh Brolin, I'm just kind of scrolling through here, just looking through and seeing who Charlotte Rampling. I'm trying to think if she was just in something else. But through my old ramblings here. But this movie, I'm trying to make this spoiler free for the most part. The thing I liked about this movie, I think this is a companion piece almost to David Lynch's movie, because David Lynch, because you don't get this hit over the head with information. If you read, it's meant for, I think it's meant for the fans and for the fans of the David Lynch movie, because you don't have all this over the head dialogue that tells you what's going on. You just got, from seeing the other movie, you assume you know what's going on from the original movie, and it's told more subtly. It's there, it's just told more subtly, but there's no explanation of some of the characters and some of the events. But basically, the overlying concept of the movie is you have one faction who rules, who are been given governorship of this planet Arrakis, where the spice is that I spoke about earlier. They are mining this spice from this planet, and at the beginning of this movie, this governorship's being handed over to another faction. You essentially kind of have space imperialism here, because there is an indigenous people to this planet that are, you know, adapted to the planet. The planet's very harsh. It's just a big desert planet, assumably Dune, obviously, by the title of the movie. And they they're handed over. The people who are handing over, the ruling faction who is handing over the governorship to the next faction, the House of Atreides, essentially. And the story kind of revolves around a character called Paul Atreides, which is the Timothy Chalamet character. And Timothy, uh, Paul is you slowly begin finding out that he has essentially psychic abilities. And because his mother is part of this group of, they're essentially like, I guess they're witches, essentially. But they're called Jesuit, like, priestesses or Jesuit witches. They're just a group of women who have these, they're like soothsayers. They have these abilities. And he wasn't supposed to be, and his mother was one of these people, but she breaks from that group of people to become married to Paul's father, who's the king of the House of Atreides, or whatever, or the kind of the leader of the House of Atreides. But, and I apologize here, Oscar Isaacs placed that his father on there. It was Duke Leto Atreides. And Atreides, excuse me. I call him Atreides. Yeah, it's Atreides. Excuse me. Um, my vision's not really good, so. But Paul, he's not supposed to be born. They're not supposed to have a son. They can have like a daughter, because she was a Jesuit witch, so essentially. But she secretly has Paul, and he is inheriting these traits. So, the movie. But going back to the movie itself, I just want to give you kind of a broad stroke of kind of what's happening, without trying to ruin the movie. I guess I probably did spoil it a little bit there, but but going back to the movie is beautifully shot. It really nice. I'll have to bring up this cast and crew here. I wish it brought up the director of photography first. with the director. It never does. And okay, here we go. Obviously, the music was by Hans Zimmer. You know, this is it's kind of funny. Everybody was talking about the score with Hans Zimmer, and they said, "Well, Hans Zimmer's got this style and everything, and it's really beautifully done." But you know, this is coming from. I used to be a sound engineer when I was younger, and I'm used to like breaking down music and breaking down an individual song into like its different elements, different instruments, and things like that. When I listen to music, it just naturally that's what happens. I kind of hear the drums separately, I hear the bass and guitar separately, and it enables you to be able to mix music. But I didn't really pay attention to the music in this. You know, everybody was talking about it. You know, his style and everything like that. I didn't pay attention to it. It was really good, and that's how I kind of equate. I mean, some soundtracks hit you over the head, like our next movie with Wes Anderson. He usually hits you over the head with his soundtracks and things like that. And some other people like just other directors will kind of hit you over the head with the soundtrack. I felt like this was kind of more subtle, and it has its big moments and everything. But if I, most of the time, if the sound design is good, that I don't really pay attention to it. But the cinematographer was, let's see, Greg Fraser. Okay, very nice looking. The pacing of the movie is really good. Some people might think it's a little bit slow and not enough action. Being a person who loves older movies, I like very good dialogue. Now, this isn't the kind of dialogue you see like in a Bogart movie or something where you have like, it's like really like it really plays off each other. It's not that type of movie. Some movies are not like that. Some dramas are not like that where you just have, you have people more of it's more comedy timing in a comedy, but this isn't a comedy. So it has to be more dramatic type acting and more dramatic type dialogue. So it's more it's more impactful to you. So that's you have a lot of exposition explaining things going on in the movie. Even though I don't think the exposition actually hits you over the head quite as much as the Lynch movie. I think Lynch had to just get right into it and like had to tell you what's going on just because he had so little time to tell what he had to tell. He had to condense so much of the movie, so he had to progress the movie along so fast that he was just unable to like kind of draw out the dialogue. That's because you would think a David Lynch movie you would be heavy dialogue driven and in a very visual manner, and I feel like his movie isn't it is visual for sure, but it's not as visual as like some of his other works like Lost Highway or something where you're kind of getting you the story's being driven by not only by the spoken word but driven by the visual effect of the movie, which is usually that's why a lot of modern movies just don't. A lot of times I say, well, this isn't that great. Like a lot of the newer, like the newest stuff lately, politics aside, they're just not good movies because they're just not well made. They're not well written. They just want to the dialogue's just there to advance the story to the next CGI action scene, and that's that's what we've lost in filmmaking. I think we were getting lazy. The writing's getting lazy because it's using CGI for a crutch, and it's dumbed down the audience to the point of where like you can't even get people to watch old movie like a 30s or 40s movie. I mean, these movies are phenomenal. I mean, even like a mediocre movie is just like heads and tails above what you see like and when what you see today in today's screen, on today's movies, and we're getting so much stuff because of because not you, well, YouTube, yes, but because of Netflix Hulu and all these people are producing movies, and Amazon are producing movies, producing content. It's just about putting content out. It's not about putting out. That's why you see people like Wes Anderson and David Lynch and people like this, and even the director of this movie, which I'd had to. I always forget everything else that he has done. I apologize. I know he's done some other really good stuff. I'm trying to think what else he did. Oh, he did. He done Blade Runner. Yeah, but you see a lot of these. But I mean, in the back in the day, they made a lot of movies too, and a lot of directors made like John Ford. They made tons of movies, and not every John Ford movie is good. But you can say the same thing about modern filmmakers, and maybe they'll make one good movie out of 10. But the problem is there's so much content there, and I guess part of the reason why and some people say, well, they're allowing people that are amateur filmmakers. They're not very good. And I agree that there's a lot of people they're just giving these roles just to fill a certain slot in, like, oh, we got a woman director, we got an Asian director, we got a gay director. Some of that is being done, and it's being done, and it's being done at the really at the expense of Hollywood. They're going to kill themselves by doing this, but also it's being done because they're just trying to produce so much content. They got so many sources of content being produced that it is it's very it's they're just having to throw these people in there, and it's just watering down the pool of talent. You're just rolling these people out of film school, and the only thing they've watched is 80s movies and stuff like that. And there's some good 80s movies, but you got to watch everything. And I mean, there's probably a few of them out there. But if you see like great filmmakers, like, like the four mentioned people that I have talked about, you know, but, especially you see somebody like, like Wes Anderson or, P.T. Anderson, but a film by Quentin Tarantino. You can see that they watch movies. They're students of film, and to me, that's very important, and that's why I like watching. I like watching the things that influence Tarantino. And there's other people out there that watch stuff like that, but or people that influence other film directors. These greats. We had some great filmmakers, and a lot of the filmmakers. Everybody's heard of John Ford, but maybe people may not have heard of Howard Hawks or people like that. And there's a lot of other ones that. These people are just masters at cinema, and it's just amazing what they put in. And plus, you have a lot of, you have a lot of foreign directors too that are amazing. Federico Fellini, for example, and a lot of the spaghetti western people that made spaghetti westerns and things like that. But my overall review of Dune is very good. I don't really have a ranking system. I always do different things. I would say out of 10, it was probably a realistically an 8 out of 10. It's a good movie. Um, I always say stupid things. I mean, like, I highly recommend it and stuff. Yes, you should see it. It's a good movie. It doesn't have any politics in it, which is a good thing this day. I don't like being preached at in my movies. And some movies, there's just a political aspect built into it, which I guess there is. That's like I said earlier. It looks like, if you look at the story as a whole, with Dune, it is kind of this imperialism onto this planet. But I mean, they're not necessarily, they're not really necessarily destroying the planet. They're not necessarily really robbing the planet of its resources. They're getting spice, but it seems to be in high abundance here, and they've been doing it for years and years and years. So that's not really the issue. So that's never brought up. It's like, oh, they're destroying the planet, but you don't want to change the planet's climate, for God's sakes. But that's a discussion for another day. But this is a good movie. I would go see it. I give it an 8 out of 10. It was nicely paced. It looked really good. well written. I liked how it was written, and like I was saying earlier, I feel like it's almost a companion piece to the David Lynch movie. But it's definitely check it out. I mean, I seen it in IMAX. I had to go see it. I'm a movie goer. I like going to the movie theater. I don't like sitting home. Even though I watch tons of movies here, I've got a good TV to watch it on, but I still rather go see it in person on the big screen. So that's it for my Dune review. Now let's move over to the new Wes Anderson movie. The French Dispatch is the newest movie by writer-director Wes Anderson. Wes is probably one of my favorite filmmakers in the past 25 years. I kind of can't wait for his movies to come out. It's almost kind of like waiting for a Quentin Tarantino movie to come out in a way. But I think I like Wes a little bit better than Quentin, just because I think he's just a bit more original. I've heard Wes called it hipster before. I would say he's a hipster. I wouldn't call myself a hipster, but it's I could see that his movies being a little bit hipsterish, but they're very creative. I really like his movies, and I don't know. This is a this movie here is probably I couldn't necessarily say it's a culmination of kind of all of his work, because it's definitely not, because you don't have like the stop motion, the kind of claymation stuff. The other stuff's not so much claymation; it's just modeling, like stop motion model with movies like The Isle of Dogs and Fantastic Mr. Fox, of course. But you do have a little bit of animation in this movie. But the French Dispatch, it revolves around Bill Murray's character, and but the French Dispatch, it revolves around Bill Murray's character. It it's a series of stories, kind of set up like three acts in a play. You have the prologue and epilogue of this movie. There's not the beginning and the ends aren't really so much important in this movie. It does a little bit of setup about um, the character of Bill Murray's, which is Arthur Howitzer Jr. Arthur Howitzer Jr. is basically, he owns the French Dispatch, which is a French. It's essentially French, it's like a French. It's like a French magazine that's an insert to like a Midwestern United States paper. Excuse me. Um, I believe it's the paper. I guess originally must have been owned by Arthur Howitzer. I don't know why I'm messing up on Howitzer. Arthur Howitzer Senior, and Bill Murray essentially was kind of like a student going to Europe, and he went to France to. I guess he went there initially on a vacation. Ends up buying a, I forget what it's called what it formerly was, but it's essentially like some kind of other top newspaper. But he essentially buys this little journalist newspaper thing. But essentially, so he ends up making the French Dispatch, and it's like an insert to this Midwestern newspaper, and it's just kind of gives you insights into the culture of the French, and European culture, and insights to different aspects of that, of that lifestyle. But you get different kind of columns in there, obviously, and that's what the story's about. At the beginning of the movie, Arthur Howitzer Jr. has passed away, and his kind of his dying request is, after he dies, the paper will no longer exist. It will be shut down, and all the employees will be, be let go and all this stuff. But he issues one last. There will be like one last issue of this story, of this magazine, and everybody will, then basically the contributors to this magazine. I guess this is basically the people who's been writing for him for years. They kind of contribute like a last story for the paper. So and that's how the story is set up. And you have three. Then you have subsequently, I guess, three stories that are revolves around the journalist and their story, and the other actors that appear in this movie are within these stories. Kind of like the first story is surrounds. It's kind of funny how they have them build right here. They kind of have them build in order as far as the kind of their appearance in the movie, because so the Benicio del Toro, he's the okay. Well, it's better to say that Tilda Swinton is the art critic for the paper and the art journalist, and Benicio del Toro is actually I'm trying not to do a lot of spoilers in this, but Benicio del Toro is a convicted murderer and convicted criminal in a prison, and they kind of find out that I guess she has found out that he is like this genius painter. He's a painter of like he does. It's kind of like Picasso, maybe. He's just like abstract modern art. It's kind of like the birth of abstract modern art. They're the way they're depicting this in this movie. But Leah Sado is, excuse me, I hadn't flipped back, but Leah Sado is plays Simone, and it's essentially his muse, Benicio del Toro's muse, and she's a prison guard in this prison, but she like models nude for him, and I mean you get like full frontal nudity from him, which is very shocking from a. It's not shocking for so much the potential for Wes Anderson, but it's I don't think I've ever seen it in a Wes Anderson movie. And also something else is the language that's used in the movie is more it's a little bit it's a little more adult for Wes Anderson, which it's always, his writing's always, kind of highbrow, and always like really good. It's always good, but this has some points of like almost like where he's using curse words, and here and there, and they're used in the right spots. Like when he uses curse words in his movies, they're always kind of on point, and they're used in the correct, kind of the correct manner, or in just a spot where it's going to bring out the maximum laugh value to that, using that word, instead of just, throwing them out all the time. It's just like every other word's a curse word. They're kind of used poignantly. So it's a little bit the I'm sorry I can't explain this real well, but the the writing is just it's really it feels a little bit different. It just it feels it feels a little bit more mature in scope, but essentially, but Leah Sado models for him, and Tilda Swinton. But I'm not going to go. And Adrian Brody shows up. He's an art dealer. He works for an art gallery dealer with him, and a couple other people, which is who is I think Babylon Balabam. I do that every time I mess his name up. Bob Balabam and Henry Winkler are also like his two brothers or something in this, and they really don't have a lot of speaking roles in it. Kind of shame Henry Winkler's in this, but he's just kind of a background player. Really, it's really a shame. But the rest of the movie is a series of stories. You got Frances McDormand is the she's the political journalist, excuse me, and which that storyline has Timothy Chalamet and Lena Coldry. Jeffrey Wright actually plays the food critic, which is the closing act, the last storyline. I think the first and I think the middle with Frances McDormand is a little bit it's not my favorite. It's not got to do anything with the politics, even though I think the politics they're trying to mimic or kind of almost make fun of what's going on now because they're kind of using this like a laid back, like a lazy French Revolution, like French student revolution. It's kind of pointless, and it's like why are you having this standoff with the government over like a girls' dormitory? But I'm trying not to say a whole lot. I mean, I don't want to ruin it because people, you guys need to go see. You need to either go to the theater and see this, or see it as soon as you can on physical media. I'll be looking forward to it. I don't know. Isle of Dogs never did get put on. It never, for some reason, it never was put on Criterion. Like all of Wes's movies are Criterion, but Isle of Dogs was not Criterion. Hopefully, this one will be put on Criterion. I mean, it's deserving. You think, well, does it really deserve to be a new and contemporary? Deserve to be on that? But yeah, it does. But I would highly recommend this movie. Just the rundown of the cast: Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Leah Sado, Frances McDormand, Timothy Chalamet. I might be pronouncing his last name incorrectly, but I think that's how it's pronounced. Lena Coldry, Lena Coldry, Jeffrey Wright, Matthew Amalric, Matthew Amalric, Steve Park, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Bob Balaban, Henry Winkler, Louis Smith, I guess that's it. Yeah, Louis Smith, Tony Revolori, Dennis Menashe, and Larry Pine. Very nice cast. He always has wonderful cast in his movie, as you guys know. But I don't know. This movie is really good. I give it at least an 8 or 9 out of 10. If I do a 10-point rating system, next time I might have it be A, B, C, D, or F. I might give it that kind of. I just move around. I don't like giving like 2 thumbs up. Yeah, something. That's been done for years. But out of a lot of places do a 10-point rating system. I think if I scroll up here, that I think the Internet Movie Database gave it 7.5, and I give a little bit higher than that, especially knowing that when I go back and rewatch it, there'll be a lot of subtleties that I've missed, and in the theater, and it's just like Isle of Dogs was the same way. Like Isle of Dogs, I left the theater not appreciating it as much as I should have. But when I at second and third watchings, I was like, you just kind of get blown away about, you know, just the way the movie's put together. But I highly recommend this movie. I highly recommend you guys going back and watching Wes Anderson movies. And by the way, you see I'm wearing a different shirt. I didn't record this. I'm recording this the next day. I went to do the editing for this video and realized that that I evidently didn't record somehow. I didn't hit the record button, or it got turned off. Something happened with my last recording, and I'm doing this again. I think this one come off a little bit slicker than that one too. I rambled a little more in that one. But one thing I did do in this one, I'm gonna list all Wes Anderson movies off the top of my head. I don't have them pulled up on the screen. In fact, you can see what my other screen here, so you know that I'm not cheating. So we're going to start off with Bottle Rocket, Rushmore, Bottle Rocket number 1, Rushmore number 2, The Royal Tenenbaums number 3. Number 4 would be, and for some reason today, that Fantastic Mr. Fox keeps eluding my brain for some reason, but that's number 4. Number 5 would be the Darjeeling Express. Number 6 would be the Grand Budapest Hotel. I think that's correct. Number 7 would be, am I missing one? Number 7. Oh, excuse me. No, excuse me. Number 7 would be I got my number system off wrong, but number 7 would be Moonrise Kingdom. Then you have Grand Budapest Hotel, and number 9 was Isle of Dogs. I think this is either 9th or 10th. I got off on my numbering. So, in the French Dispatch. He's had some commercials and stuff he's done in between. I don't really count all that. Obviously don't count that with major motion pictures, but he's had some shorts that I haven't never seen that I can't find them really. So if anybody has any information about that stuff out there, I'd like to give her some. I think there's like a Bottle Rocket short. The Bottle Rocket short might be on the Criterion. I can't remember. It seemed like I've seen that one, but regardless, I highly recommend The French Dispatch. You guys should check it out. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys like this review. I'm trying to do a little bit better with my reviews. I still like trying to do them off the top of my head like this, but I'm trying to decide if I want to try to start scripting stuff, because I can write better than I can come off the top of my head a little bit. I mean, I know I'm trying to script some things that I'm going to post over on Rumble. Just be more. I've actually got another Rumble channel and that I'm trying to do some more political commentary on, and I'm trying to put it over there because Facebook don't like some of this stuff. But thank you for watching my Dune and French Dispatch review. I'm going to quit rambling and get out of here and talk to you guys later. And if you like what you've seen today, make sure to give me a big thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. Follow the page. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Kentucky Fried Reviews 420. And make sure to follow me on Rumble and on YouTube. I will talk to you guys later.